He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
G'day and welcome to Country Life. I'm Duncan Smith.
Kia ora, great to have your company. Ko Sally round tēnei. Today we catch up with a woman of many skills, one of those helping shearers through traditional Māori healing.
We meet a Norsewood local whose connection to his Norwegian roots are as strong as the metal being forged in his smithy.
And later, Cosmo goes bush with a botanist who's turning rough, gorsey farmland into a native forest. But first to a wrap of the week's rural news with Sally Murphy from RNZ's Rural News Team. Now, Sally, there's been some welcome rain this week in the North Island.
There has been, but it was a bit of a mixed blessing. Farmers in Hawke's Bay really needed it, while further north, in Te Tairāwhiti, farmers got more than they wanted. We spoke to one farmer near Tokumaru Bay who'd just spent the last of his post-cyclone road repair money before the heavy rain arrived, and he's now having to deal with flood debris and damage to newly repaired tracks. And just while we're in that region, we spoke to another farmer this week who says the losses he's carrying with his maize crop this season is far worse than anything Cyclone Gabrielle threw at him. Alan Newton farms near Wairoa, and he says New Zealand's main grain purchaser isn't buying off farmers because it's imported vast quantities of cheaper product from Europe. He says the company purchased a large amount of grain from overseas, knowing their silos still had a lot of grain inside they'd bought the season before.
Costing us somewhere near $1,000 a hectare, so we can't afford to pay our mortgages, HPs and things like that. It's a bigger disaster than the cyclone. To me, it comes across as intentionally sabotaging the industry to create a fire sale. And they knew that there was a lot of grain planted on the east coast. The buyers that sign up for contracts when you plant just suddenly disappeared off the market, and there's thousands of tonnes of uncontracted grain on the east coast of the North Island.
Alan Newton says it's the third bad season in a row, and he's depressed by it.
Now, what does the company involved say?
Well, we've reached out to them, but we're still waiting to hear back.
The Farmers' Union in the UK has been anti-New Zealand lamb coming into its local market for a wee while now. What's the latest there?
Well, the British National Farmers Union raised concerns about large supermarket chain Morrison's trialling the sale of New Zealand lamb in its stores. The union says the supermarket dropping its commitment to sell only British lamb is disappointing at a time when the British livestock industry is under pressure. Morrison's says the move is due to customer demand for cheaper prices and that the blunt commercial reality is that New Zealand lamb is cheaper to source. Beef and Lamb Chair Kate Ackland says New Zealand lamb is cheaper because farmers here are so efficient.
I mean, the UK and New Zealand have complementary seasons, and that means that consumers in the UK can have access to the best seasonal products all year round. And it actually benefits farmers in both countries. It stabilises the market, it supports price levels, and it keeps lamb on the table of consumers over there.
Now, you have some figures from the primary produce exporting sector, Sally. How are things looking?
Well, not so green for Zespri, the kiwi fruit marketer. Its profit has dropped 27%, and the company's putting that down mainly to reduced licence revenue as growers paid less to grow gold and red varieties last season. The major honey exporter, Comvita, they've downgraded their forecast revenue due to weak consumer demand in China. But the major apple exporter, Scales Corporation, says that issue is not affecting its overall sales too much. Here's Andy Borland, the company's managing director.
It's been a tighter market, but we're probably seeing signs of improvement latterly. So we're pretty happy with this year's sales.
And just a word on dairy prices, they're rising at the fastest level in 3 months. The average price at this week's global auction rose 3.3% to $3,861. It follows the 1.8% rise a fortnight ago. The price of whole milk powder, which strongly influences the payouts for farmers here, rose 2.9% to $3,408 a tonne. Prices for all other products also rose, including butter, which was up more than 5%. The dairy season is winding down, And recent market prices support a forecast payout of $7.80 per kilo of milk solids.
Now, a new software program is helping streamline things at the milking shed.
It is. Livestock Visibility Solutions has a new software program called Flow. It's designed to streamline cow movement from the yard to the milking shed by automating the backing gate system. Rakaia share milker Rick Butler, who's been using the tech for a couple of months, says it's made a big improvement.
For us, it's like tangibly, the cows are a lot less stressed. The system's got its camera looking at the yard all the time, giving the cows plenty of space and encouraging them forward really gently when they need it. And that's all.
And what's the latest on tackling the shortage of rural workers, Sally?
Well, Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, has given Rural Women New Zealand $90,000 towards grants for students whose study will benefit healthcare in rural communities. Meanwhile, the state-owned farming company Pāmu has launched an apprenticeship scheme to help get more young people into farming from next year. 9 school leavers enrolled in agriculture courses across the Central North Island, Waikato and Bay of Plenty will be selected for the 2-year apprenticeship at Pāmu's farm near Taupō.
And you have the results of this year's Ahu Whenua Trophy, which celebrates excellence in Māori farming.
Aotearoa's top Māori dairy farm has been named, their Waikato dairy company, Wairarapa Moana Kepukani. It has a 12,000-strong dairy herd across 12 farms in Mangakino in the North Island. Its chair, Kingi Smiler, says installing Māori values on farm is critical to their success.
Overall, the philosophy is kaitiakitanga, so building a sustainable land use operation, in this case dairy farming, for the next generation. And so to do that, it needs to be both sustainable from an environmental point of view and also from generating income and returns that can both continue to develop the property and also share the benefits with our shareholders.
And Ben Purua, the farm manager at Waimakariri Lands in South Waikato, won the Young Māori Farmer Award. And just a word on avian influenza before we wrap up. Hundreds of thousands of chickens have been euthanised at an egg farm in Australia. The property near Meredith in Victoria is in quarantine, and testing has revealed that the strain of the disease is H7N3, the most commonly occurring variant in Australia. The detection comes amid fears of a global avian flu outbreak after the widespread detection of the H5N1 strain overseas, most recently found in the US dairy cow herd.
Something to watch out for. Thanks very much, Sally.
This is Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
She's been a shearer, a teacher and a social worker. More recently, Serena Leiders has found her calling as a traditional healer, working with shearers all around the motu. Janina Schwanneker spoke to Serena about how her rural upbringing helped prepare her for a lifetime of service and giving back to her community.
Kia ora, ko whitu matarau te maunga, wai atu tawa, harau te tawaka, ngā te plau te iwi, ko Serena Leiders tōku ingoa. So my family, my mother's family hails from the East Cape of the North Island. I live in the Catlins. I live in Tukunui, married to a sheep and beef farmer.
Now, you yourself had a very rural upbringing. Can you tell me what it was like growing up in a 6th-generation shearing gang?
My family obviously spent a lot of time in shearing for generations in both sides of my family. So I grew up in Western Southland, a little place called Ojai, which was a booming coal mining town, booming shearing town, and also home of Mount Linton Station. So everything we needed was right in our little town, the centre of the world. You know, everything wasn't centralised in the cities then, so, you know, we had everything in our little rural town. So I guess that really set me up for a lot of the stuff that I do now, and that, you know, you just, if you want something done, you just get on and do it. I guess that's just part of rural life, and really has made a huge difference when I think about it and the way that I do things as an adult, growing up in that little country town and surrounded by amazing people from all walks of life. People would come in droves over the summertime. You know, you're only sure once a year then, and so the town would boom to astronomical numbers over the summertime and over the main shear, and they would come from all over the country. It really did set me up for the rest of my life.
From that small country upbringing, you've gone on to have quite a varied and interesting career.
It's one way to describe it, I guess. Some would say chaotic mess, but, you know, I guess it's still hanging on to that rural sector and a lot of the things that I do, rural woman, part of rural woman, and working in the shearing industry in the way that I do, the capacity that I do. I guess living rurally as well. I shore for a little while when my boys were little, but worked in the shearing industry up until I was 27, and I went away to university, trained to be a primary bilingual school teacher, and then went into social work after that. So I have my own company now and am self-employed and run a consultancy company and as well as a wellbeing centre. So social sector, as much as I've tried to run away from it, keeps calling me back in all sorts of capacities. I suppose it is varied when you look at it like that.
What was it that led you to start whānau consultancy services?
I had been working for the commissioning agency for whānau ora, Te Pūtahitanga, and you know, when you're working at those higher levels of decision making, and you're working across. I was working across the whole South Island and doing a whole lot of stuff there. I kind of got to a point where I was like, actually, I want to make the decisions. I want to have the influence in the way that I practice and the places and spaces that I can go into comfortably. And so I wanted to be able to practice as myself and not of the values of somebody else or another organisation, or in my eyes it wasn't giving to the people that were important to me, which was the shearing industries.
You definitely seem someone who's comfortable wearing many hats, often all at once. What's your next big project or challenge?
So I am on the board of Share for a Cause, and so we met with Joseph Mooney and the MP the other day around how do we connect the services in the rural sector. How do we connect them together so that they're appropriate for the shearing industry? That is more than 80% Māori, or I think it's more than 90% now, but a high percentage of Māori. The services are all there. We don't need to recreate the wheel, but how do we make them industry specific and culturally appropriate? I also do traditional healing and massage therapy and all of that sort of stuff. So I travel around some of the shearing shows and normalising looking after their body physically, spiritually, emotionally, on the ground in the industry. You know, I've spent my whole life, 48 years, of watching people hammer their bodies and push them to the extreme and not actually take care of them in a culture of harden up, work harder, do everything harder, and watch lots of people I care about have buckled knees, have, come out the other end of the industry quite physically hurt. So trying to normalise that, as well as traditionally accessing rongoa Māori and wherever they are. So they might come and see me once at the Golden Shears, but then they're going to go home and they're going to find the people in their whānau collective who does traditional healing or who does some of that spiritual stuff. We've got a whole generation, or a whole industry impacted by colonisation and the intergenerational trauma that's associated to that. And so how do we address that? Because the side effects are detrimental for our communities, for our families, the drinking, the drugs, all of the darker side of our society. They're all just flow-on effects of something much deeper. So, and I guess in being a social worker for feels like eons, I realised that actually our people need healing, because I can run around and put sticking plasters on all of these gaping wounds, or I can actually try and grow this space of getting some soul healing, and what the impact of that is massive and has a ripple effect out through their families.
That was Serena Leiders of whānau Consultancy Services talking to Janina Schwannecker.
Let's take a trip to the small village of Norsewood in southern Hawke's Bay now and pop into an old-fashioned blacksmith's forge on the main street. About 350 people live in the settlement, tucked away off State Highway 2, and many have a proud connection to Norway. In fact, they were just about to celebrate Norway Constitution Day when I dropped in on the Norseman blacksmith Jamie Hughes. His ties to Norway also run deep.
I was born here in Norsewood, but grew up in Hawke's Bay. My mother's Norwegian and my father is descendant of the original Norsewood settlers. So my four-time great-grandfather was on the Hovding. So my plot of land, or the family plot of land, is still down the bottom there.
And the Hovding was the original immigrant ship that came out?
That's correct. Yeah, the first load of Norwegians that came to found Norsewood was the Hovding, 1872.
How does that make you feel, being so connected to this place?
Good. Funnily enough, I only just found this out in the last 6 months. Didn't know my father's history. Always known Mum's Norwegian. Mum's very proud of her Norwegian heritage. My father has never had an interest in pursuing his genetics, so I went digging, and I found out about 6 months ago that he's descendant, and the family name was Johansson. So quite interesting and surprising, and it explains why I am, I guess, personally a proud Norwegian as well. I've always had this, not sense of not belonging in New Zealand, but I've always had this feeling I need to get overseas and travel, and like a seafarer, I guess, and I do feel at home here in Norsewood.
Now you have your small business here as well. You're a blacksmith by trade?
Not by trade, self-taught. So I took an interest in it a number of years ago, 16 years ago now, and it was a hobby for a long, long time. And then a few years ago I decided that I wanted to make a go of it as a business. So I spent the last 3 years sort of growing and promoting the business and put staff on, and they're learning. I've showed the Gateway student here who's loving blacksmithing. Jar, who's been with me for 18 months, learning and developing his skill set. He's come a long, long way.
We're just basically manipulating the steel into a hook.
And that's Jar Menzies Winson at the forge.
We'll be riveting this side through into a back plate, having an S supporting it from the bottom.
Also a proud Norsewood local.
Mum's Scottish, Gaelic and Dad's Norwegian.
Your heritage is very much connected to this area.
Yeah, it definitely feels like home. Yeah. People around here definitely help as well. They're very accepting. Yeah, some of the nicest people I've ever met.
And have you always been a blacksmith yourself?
Well, I started on stock removal, meaning I used to grind steel away to make combat weapons for medieval reenactment. And then I met Jamie at the Viking Festival and asked him how to get into things traditionally. And lucky for me, he gifted me my first forge, sent me on my way for a few years, and then gave me a message saying that he needed help with the shop. So I moved up, and here I am.
By the sound of things, it's not a dying trade.
We're a bit of a dying breed, but it's coming back, fortunately. A lot of people are staying away from mass production items and wanting some quality and handcrafted stuff.
And you even have a student with you today.
Yes, Huber. He's doing extremely well. He's been with me for 5-6 weeks now. Comes in once a week, and he's learning the ropes. Yeah, 16.
16?
Yeah.
And are you keen on becoming a blacksmith yourself? Don't know.
He's still in his early stages, but he's picked it up extremely fast.
Well, I'll let you get back to your job. You're also one of the people involved in the Viking Festival here in Norsewood.
Yeah, correct. It's just an event we run here to sort of celebrate Norwegian heritage. It sort of ties in with the Norsewood theme. So being Norwegian, we have that proud Viking ancestry, and we like to sort of promote that. And by starting the event, or when Eva sort of brought the idea to the table and we sort of grew this festival, it went from what was supposed to be a small market type event to the 7,000 visitor event, which was really unexpected. But I guess it's a fun family weekend. You know, we do axe throwing and archery and reenactment, and there's 60 odd stalls every year and food. It's a great weekend out. People dress up and come and have a lot of fun.
Is there a growing interest in the Viking culture?
Oh, absolutely.
Why is that?
Mainly, I think it's because of the Vikings TV series. It glamorised Viking life, and it actually painted it in a better light than what people believe Vikings were. There's always been Vikings, rapists and pillagers, and that was it, which was part of the history. But there was more to them than that. They were farmers. They were normal people that were struggling, that needed to survive. So they went out and they looked for new lands, and it's a really, really neat culture. And the deeper you look into it, the better it gets.
What else are you involved with here?
Try not to be involved with too much, but I am the chairman of the Norsewood Promotions Group. So we organise local events and promoting 17th of May, which is coming up on Sunday, Norwegian Constitution Day. So we celebrate that here every year. We do a parade and a market, and we're doing a cake competition this year, a bake-off. Cemetery tours and museum tours, just once again celebrating Norsewood's roots.
Do many visitors from Scandinavia pass through? Are they intrigued by the place?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be quite surprised at how many Norwegians and Swedes and Finnish people stop in Norsewood. They see Norsewood on the road and they're, what the hell is this? And they come in, they look around, and they can spend hours wandering around. I would say we probably get 5 to 10 Norwegians every week. I think it's more passing through. They're travelling New Zealand because we are a tourist country, and they see the Norsewood sign, and it's a place they've got to stop because, once again, Norwegians are very proud, and they see something Norse, they've got to have a look.
And they won't be disappointed if they come in here with all the decorative metalwork, knives and Viking-related paraphernalia on display. In the corner there's a Norwegian family heirloom, a tall, handsome-looking stove that looks a little bit different from your average Kiwi-style log burner.
It's very decorative, sort of got a crown on the top. You can look it up, it's called an Ulefoss oven. They're solid cast. They weigh, well, this one in particular weighs about 600 kilos. It's 162 years old. It was installed in the relative's family home in Norway. It was damaged in the war, so when the Germans occupied Norway, it got damaged with the explosions, got stored for many, many years. My auntie found it in 2004 and had it restored, and she used it for 10 years. And then in 2014 she brought it to New Zealand.
And can you tell me something about your knives? That's a bit of a specialty of yours?
It is, yes. So the main thing I do here is, well, we do here is make knives. And we can make anything from a very basic general purpose bushcraft knife for daily use right through to hand-forged Damascus chef knives. We do a lot of commission work, so we'll take custom builds on where you bring your specs into me and we can build to your style, so that way you get a piece that's an heirloom piece, it's yours as you want it for the rest of your life. As well as we send knives all over the world. I sell knives to Norway, America, Canada, Europe.
But this niche rural business is feeling the flow-on effects of tough economic times, like many in rural New Zealand.
I feel it right across the board. So I sell knives to chefs, which is a hospitality trade which has got in a downturn currently. I sell knives to dairy farmers and sheep farmers, and they're struggling at the moment, so they're not spending, as well as the tourist market. So across all three sectors there's a downturn, and so I'm feeling it from all angles at the moment. We're not a necessity. I mean, the economy is struggling. We're in a recession. People just don't have that spare money to be able to buy luxury items, and knives, unfortunately, are a luxury item. I think people, when I see it, people are struggling. They're struggling to pay day-to-day bills, and that has a flow-on effect to myself. We're going to downscale and get back to our roots, make it more of a hobby. We'll still open on Sundays for tourists and people to come and have a look and see what we're doing. But we're going to be mostly online. So we will readdress it in summer. Once there's a bit more confidence in the market and the tourists come back, we will look at opening the doors again.
Have you noticed a drop-off in tourism here locally? Absolutely,
yep. People are still mulling around, but they're not spending. They're still moving, they're still there, not in the same numbers they were last year, but they're keeping their wallets close to their chest.
How does that affect the mood of the town?
It's a little hard to gauge. I mean, not having the people in the town, it does make it seem a little bit ghost town-like during the week. You can walk out of the main street, there's not a single car or human in sight. And it does feel a little bit isolated, but then that's kind of why we're here in the first place, for that peace and quiet.
So it's pretty tough, everyone's feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've mulled over it for nearly 6 months to make this decision. It's been a really, really tough decision to make. But it's something we have to do, unfortunately.
Are there any other businesses that are closing or have closed down?
Not that I'm aware of locally. I was in Masterton last week, I was in Palmerston this week, and every second shop is empty. There's a lot of small businesses closed down. I think I looked on a company's office a couple of weeks ago, and 360 businesses liquidated last month. So that just shows how bad it is out there.
How long had you been going?
I've had the shop trading for 3 years. I traded through COVID, I survived COVID, I survived everything thrown at me until the interest rate hikes. That's what's killed me. The cost of living is it's so high now.
And
shame.
raw materials?
Steel costs are up, fuel costs are up, but we run an LPG forge. They've gone from $30 to $50 a bottle. And we'll burn 2 bottles making Damascus. Mortgage payments are up. So I own the property here, and my mortgage payments are up significantly, and it all has that flow-on effect. It's just we got to play the waiting game. As you see it throughout life, there's these ups and downs in our economy, and this is just another down.
And I was talking there to Jamie Hughes, the Norseman blacksmith. He's still taking commissions and selling online, and you can visit the blacksmiths on Sundays or by appointment. Jamie's looking forward to another celebration of all things Viking at the Norsewood Viking Festival in February next year. Next time, we're back in Norsewood at the Norseware factory, a business which has seen its ups and downs, but still remains very connected to the local community.
Hi, I'm Sam Neill, here at Two Paddocks, listening to Country Life on RNZ, my favourite show.
Henewai Reserve is made up of steep hills and wilding gullies overlooking Banks Peninsula's rugged eastern coastline. It's managed by 79-year-old botanist Hugh Wilson, who also lives on the secluded land where he's spent years encouraging nature to reforest what was once rough and gorsey farmland. Cosmo Kentish Barnes was there recently to find out more.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you.
You too.
Good.
Now, Hugh, we are about to head out into the reserve. Can you tell me what we can see from your little house here?
Every direction is a beautiful view, but looking down the valley, we just see a big valley of regenerating native forest down to Otanerito Bay. And the wonderful news is that we've just extended the reserve right down to the sea there, down to the beach. But then if you turn in other directions, you just see a lovely skyline of regenerating bush and even some old growth patches of bush up on the Skyline Beach, and then just a wee bit further round to the highest part of the reserve. That's Taratarihu or Stony Bay Peak. It goes up into the subalpine zone. So in every direction is a beautiful view.
Is there a farm down by the beach there, at the bottom of the valley?
That's my neighbours, the Nabis. They've been here since almost the beginning of European settlement. The family has. Yep. Faye has got Māori ancestry as well. And Brian has got way back to French ancestry. So that's an interesting mixture in terms of the peninsula's history.
And we can see some of their farmland on the heads. And I guess that's what, sheep and cattle grazing land?
Sheep and cattle, yep. Although that right-hand headland is a famous historical site as well. That was where the first major interaction between Ngāi Tahu and Ngāti Māmoe was. About 1700. Moki came down with a fleet of canoes to settle some score. The word's kinship relations as well. And it was a pa called Parakakariki on the headland there. There's nothing you can see there now, but there's lots of implements and artefacts came from that area. Yep.
And when did you first come here?
It was 1987 the reserve started, but before that as a botanist, I was doing a botanical survey of Banks Peninsula, so I had visited here already. And this little farmlet that was a nucleus of Henewai was owned by a friend of my brother Jim. So I camped here, before the trust bought this first block of land.
So this was farmland?
It was all farmed, can you believe? Yeah. All this nonsense about native bush going slowly, it's all complete bullshit. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? No, it's complete nonsense.
People won't mind, I'm sure. No, you're right. I mean, the valley is entirely covered in bush.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Where does the name Henewai come from?
It's a lovely legend about Henewai the water maiden and Unuku the rainbow, But it's not, I have to admit, it's not a local Māori name. We did ask permission whether we could use that name. Also not permission, but just approval from the local iwi, local runanga. Yes, so it means the water maiden.
Did they think that was suitable for this land?
They did, and I loved it. Well, I didn't think of that name. It was on the old bullbale stencil from this little farmlet. Yeah.
Bit of history.
We were going to come up with all sorts of invented Māori names and English names, and then we found this woolbale stencil and it seemed perfect. So that's how it happened.
And it all started with the 109 hectares, and now you've got over 1,500.
Yeah, we look after about 1,600, something like that, 1,600 hectares. And 192 of those are actually owned by another trust, which we look after. It's a North Island trust called the Native Forest Restoration Trust.
Yes. Do you have volunteers?
Well, funnily enough, we don't use volunteers very much because we've got this little team of 4 of us who all know what we're doing. And, well, I think we do.
So there's Ash, Max,
and Paul, who you won't meet today. He's down the bottom. He's actually building a very sophisticated stile across a fence on our new beach track. But since we put out a little documentary about a video one, Happen Films put it out, we've been swamped with offers of volunteers, and it's lovely, but it's just impractical. We can't manage vast numbers of volunteers.
And if people are interested in watching that documentary, it's called Fools and Dreamers.
I'm not the only fool. There was more than one. But a lot of people come here and say they've seen the video and they're very keen to see the whole project. So it's been really good from all over the world as well.
Well, talking about that, when I parked my car up by the road, there was a French man wandering around.
Yep. No, we get people from everywhere.
I said hello and he said bonjour.
Comment allez-vous? So people come here without asking permission. They just can freely come in, visit the visitor centre, walk wherever they want along the track system. Yeah.
And how many kilometres of tracks have you built here?
It's about 20 kilometres, I think, including 2 tracks that run through Purple Peak Reserve.
And what should people expect if they come and do one of these walks?
They expect to see some old-growth forest, many hectares of it, but then many, many hectares of regenerating native forest.
Yes.
And the bird life is really good, and lizards and insects and all sorts, spiders galore, streams, waterfalls, yep.
And where are we about to head to now? What's happening today?
Today, well, we're just going to be walking over along West Track to the workface through lots and lots of regenerating bush on what was once farmland. Where actually Ash and Max, if it stays dry, will be taking gorse and broom out of the boundary there. And then we'll end up in the old growth forest. Only about 4% of Hinawai is old growth forest. Wandering through it, people don't realise that because you're under a high regenerated canopy anyway. But when they go into the tall red beech forest on Beach Terrace, they realise they're in something different.
Another world.
It is another world. And it was a world that was all so dominant here 700 years ago.
Now, Max, how long have you been working here?
This is our third summer.
How did you find out about the reserve?
I grew up here on Banks Peninsula, round in Pigeon Bay, so kind of was always aware of it. And then saw a job advertised for a summer worker and kind of jumped on it and ended up getting a gig, and they kept wanting me to come back.
And Ash, you've both got backpacks on. What are you carrying?
I've got a bit of everything we'd need for the day, really. Lunch, the most important thing. And we've got loppers, a pruning saw, and a tiny bit of herbicide as well.
Yes. So could you be out for the entire day doing work?
Leave the house about 8:30 and come back by 5. Yeah.
Okay, well let's head off.
All right.
They're good, those walking sticks, aren't they?
Wonderful. I got talked into them and they're terrific. It's terrific for balance. As we get older, we lose a bit of balance. And crossing streams and things, it's fantastic.
I walked up to the top of Mount Somers recently, and honestly, I really did need that walking stick.
Oh, isn't Mount Somers terrific, though?
Yeah, it was hard yakka.
Hard yakka. I love that sort of sloping, gentle snow tussock. At the top, you don't expect it.
It's beautiful.
It looks pointed from the plains.
Now we are at the visitor centre here, and this is the old, shearing shed?
Yeah, the old wool shed, yeah. In 1987 or 88, a friend called Martin Olderink, he just made it his project to convert this. We'll just have a look in the door if you like.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Into accommodation and information centre. It's been a fantastic facility for the reserve. It's used every day by day visitors, and we sleep up to 12 people.
Oh, so we've just come in and there's a big relief map of the reserve.
Southeast corner of Banks Peninsula.
There are books here and photographs. You've really got a history of Hinawai on the wall, haven't you?
Yeah.
How do people find out about the lodge here?
Oh, they simply have to ring me up in the evenings between about 7:30 and 9:30. But we close it for overnight accommodation. We close it for the winter. So we end at the end of this month for overnight accommodation, and then it opens again on the 1st of October.
There aren't many shearing sheds that are totally surrounded by a native bush.
No. Yeah, nature's just itching to put the bush back and has been getting on with it. Even while I was grazing here, the farmers have to keep fighting the kānaka, colonising their pastures, and we've just taken away the things that slow all that down, like farm animals, possums, goats. We've got a bit of an incipient wild deer problem now. So we try and remove all the deleterious things that are stopping nature just getting on with putting the bush back. And so that's all the serious work's done by nature here. We plant very little, only just a few specimen native trees around the visitor centre and the houses. And all these millions and millions of regenerating native trees are all natural regeneration. There's just absolutely no shortage of seed. And no shortage, even though we've lost some of our bird species, there's no shortage of dispersal mechanisms either by birds or by wind. So seed production's not an issue. Nature's done all the planting, all the significant planting.
Now we've just passed a pest trap.
Yep.
What are you targeting?
That's actually for stoats and ferrets, but it's a complicated thing here because the rats are the worst of the lot, and we can't control the rats, not on 1,600 hectares, not effectively. We control them around the houses. Oh, sorry.
That's good.
But we do target the mustelids and the cats down by the penguins at the sea, and we're really hammering the possums.
Now, gorse has played a big part in the regeneration project, hasn't it?
It has. And of course we did get some flack from that at first, because when we said that gorse was infesting this landscape and the only way of effectively getting rid of it was to let the native bush come through and shade it out and kill it.
Yep.
It was, of course, met with a lot of scepticism. But there's no sceptics around us now, because they'd have to shut their eyes to be sceptical now. This bit of land we're on now, this was basically gorse-infested pasture. And there is still some gorse, but very old and lanky, and more natives than gorse now. All these things are shade-tolerant natives that have just come through under the gorse canopy.
So you tolerate the gorse because it creates a nurse canopy for the natives?
Yeah, and tolerate's the right word, because we'd rather not have it. And there's natives that do the same. There's a harrier hawk just gliding over there. The native kānaka is the native coloniser, woody coloniser here. Here's a big old gorse bush, and it's on its last legs. And in 2014 it was about 28 years old.
And you're holding the gorse bush as though it's your old friend.
And not even prickly, you see. Well, the foliage is prickly still, but the trunk isn't. It's an appalling weed for farmers. They've spent all their lives trying to fight it on this marginal hill country, and sometimes with success, but sometimes it's just depressingly impossible. So I can completely understand both the hatred of gorse and the scepticism that it gives way to native forest. I understand it, but it's wrong.
Did you ever think that the land would change so quickly when you first started?
I sound a bit pompous. Yes, I did. I did think it would happen at about this speed. But it's very refreshing to see it happening. Yeah, some of the farmers used to say to me, how do you know that the natives will come through the gorse? And I'd say things like, well, you can never be certain about everything, but I'm about as certain that the sun will come up tomorrow morning.
Looking down towards the valley, we can see the forest sway like a green ocean in the wind.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Those big trees are beeches punching up through the kānaka. The kānaka makes a beautiful nurse canopy for beech. Beech is really interesting on Banks Peninsula because it's only naturally in the southeast corner. And shortly we'll be in the old growth forest. Incidentally, Cosmo, this is another slip with lots of natives beating the gorse. See that? You think gorse grows fast, but that's fuchsia, seven finger, pate, poroporo, grows in wineberry especially, grows immensely quickly. And mahoi, one of our commonest native hardwood, even more common in kānaka, but shade tolerant.
Now there is a bench here, and we can sit down and admire this huge and majestic totara.
Beautiful totara, maybe 600 years old, we're just guessing. Well, more than a guess, a sort of educated guess. Yeah. And it's a way, when you think of what this has seen, because this would have been It would have germinated not long after Polynesian settlement, maybe 150 years after Polynesian settlement. And when Captain Cook sailed right past our bay in the Endeavour in February 1770, this tree would have been quite a sizable tree. And it's not really a typical tōtara shape, is it? It's very bushy, because it's been growing in the open for a long time. Now the regenerating forest is all around it, but it's sticking way up above it.
And it's a male?
Yes, it's a male. Yeah, the podocarps all have their sexes on separate trees, but there's plenty of females around too. We've got tōtara regenerating beautifully here. And the other podocarps too, Kakitea, Matai, 2 species of tōtara. Yeah.
From what you've learnt about the work you've done here, what would you say to people that have marginal hill country land that they're not sure about what to do with?
You have to be careful what you tell people to do, don't you?
Yeah.
No, but it's fantastic on Banks Peninsula. It's not just because of what Hinawai, but Hinawai is a lovely example of what happens. But they were doing it anyway, to some extent. But now more and more people are just realising it's ridiculous to try and keep farming steep gullies and things when you can get carbon credits for them as well. But all of the biodiversity gains also. So more and more people are fencing off their gullies here on the peninsula. It's very hopeful, really.
And talking about carbon credits, they are really important to this reserve, aren't they?
Oh, they're so complicated, though. But yes, we do. A lot of our land purchase fund comes from carbon credit income. So we get carbon credits for regenerating natural forests. We've actually had a premium to some extent because of the broker that we were using, Toitu, based at Manaki Whenua, Land Care Research. So we get a bit of a biodiversity premium as well. Businesses want to buy Hinawai credits because there's all the biodiversity pluses as well. So it has been good, and it's been complicated as well because initially you think, well, these trees are going to grow anyway. What we really seem to be doing is just solving people's consciences while they go on emitting. But it hasn't really worked like that. We only sell to businesses who are committed to carbon zero in a fairly short term.
So you pick and choose?
We do.
Who purchases these credits?
We do, yeah. Yeah, we sort of ethically vet every business that our carbon credits are sold to. It's quite interesting.
And how much money can that generate?
Well, to give you an idea, about 1 hectare of regenerating forest like this sequesters every year about up to 10 tonnes of carbon dioxide. That's a gas. That's 10 tonnes of carbon dioxide gas. And sequesters it in all the plant materials, the wood and the foliage and the litter on the ground and everything. And the price per tonne or per unit, a unit is 1 tonne, metric tonne of carbon dioxide. So that started off the lowest we've ever got was about $15 per tonne, but then it went up to way above $70, and it's shrunk back a bit now, but it is a significant income for sure. And sometimes I've been called an ecological imperialist by the neighbours, but most of the neighbours are right behind what we're doing.
Yeah, why would they say that?
Well, because we seem to be wanting more and more land. But the good thing is the carbon money goes into the purchase of more land, which we wouldn't have been able to buy otherwise, and that's sequestering more carbon. So I think it's a very good way of using carbon credit money.
And recently you purchased, about 80 hectares of land?
That's our biggest news lately.
Down by the sea?
Yes. We do reach the sea in Stony Bay with our lovely neighbours, the Armstrongs, over there. But we have had a bit of an issue with access to the beach on Otanerito Valley here. And now we've bought land on the northeast side of the bay, and we're just in the process of putting a walking track down. So public access will be there, carefully managed.
And that's thanks to the carbon credits and donations?
It is. Carbon credits and donations are 2 huge sources of income now. That's a brown creeper's calling there, which is a unique South Island bird. And they're here in huge numbers. This is a real stronghold for BPP.
A little kind of squeaky noise.
Yeah. That's saying its Māori name all the time. BPP. Yeah.
That is the name of your newsletter?
Oh, yes, it is. And the idea is that it's always chittering away about how good life is on the reserve.
Yes, and you send out a newsletter twice a year, and it's all handwritten.
It is.
Why don't you use a typewriter or a computer?
Well, because we're trying to keep some of these lovely old things alive. People are forgetting how to write and how to think sometimes too, I think. So, no, we're keeping all these old things alive. I'm not poo-pooing technology. Got some marvellous technology myself, a mountain bike, for example. Got electricity. That's about it. A rural mailbox. Some technology is wonderful.
Yes. You haven't got a car. So would you bike from here all the way to Akaroa?
Oh yes, frequently to Akaroa. And up until quite recently I biked into Christchurch. That was my way of getting to Christchurch. But now I haven't got a self-righteous leg to stand on because there's a concession to extreme old age. When I go to Christchurch, which is not a huge amount to do in Christchurch, to be honest, so I don't go all that often, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Then I bike over the hill to Akaroa, put my bike on the lovely local Akaroa French Connection shuttle, and then ride off the other end into Christchurch. So it's a wonderfully efficient way of getting to
You
Christchurch.
don't need a car?
No, not at all. No, absolutely not. I did own a car once, and it was what a waste of money and time that was.
Tell me about Morris, who started this whole thing off.
Yeah, he was a Christchurch businessman, basically, and an accountant. He was actually lived his childhood on Wainui, on the other side of Akaroa Harbour from here. And he just set up a fund for purchasing land on Banks Peninsula for conservation purposes.
Gosh, how generous.
About 10 years before I met him. So when he met me, who was a botanist wandering all over Banks Peninsula, doing a botanical survey, he just asked me to look out for land. And he said, are you interested in the project? And I think I waited about half a nanosecond. I said, yes, and there's been some hassles, but no regrets ever since. And that was 40 years ago, basically, when I first met him.
And you went from 109 hectares to over 1,500. How did that happen? How did you get so much more land?
Well, the first addition onto the 109 hectares was Otanerito Station, which was just so weed infested, and by Banks Peninsula standards so big that it went through owner after owner trying to make a living out of it. And then when it came on the market 4 years after we'd bought this 109 hectares, we were almost surrounded by it. It just seemed we just had to at least make the effort to buy it. We bought most of it at a traumatic auction.
Were you there?
I was there. Morris and I were sitting there wondering how high we should bid.
Oh, how nerve-wracking.
Whether we had to go and rob a bank or something. Or take it by force.
Yeah.
Now we own, or the trust owns. I think this whole notion of owning land is ridiculous, actually, but that's the legal language, isn't it? The land owns us, really. But yeah, that's part of Hinawai now. That made it 10 times bigger in one fell swoop. And ever since then, we've just been identifying bits of land which really make sense, management-wise and ecologically. And when the opportunities come up, we try and be ready to jump at them.
We've arrived at what you call the beach terrace. What's unique about this area here?
Well, it's just that normally the beech forest remaining on the southeast corner of Banks Peninsula is in deep gullies. Yeah. And here it's just a flat spur.
With lots of big old trees.
And huge old trees. And because the soils are relatively thin here, there was black beech in here as well.
What sparked your interest in botany in the first place?
I suspect it was, it's hard to say, isn't it? But I had parents who just loved the outdoors. Dad was a very keen fly fisherman. Mum was a very keen walker. And we went on these amazing family holidays, camping holidays, with 2 big family tents. We went all over the place. So I suspect that's what sparked it.
And ever since then, it's been a huge thing in your life.
Yes, and I always do. I mean, this has been a large part of my life. Now, I've been here for 37 years. So I'm 79 now. What does that make it? What proportion of my life? It's quite a big chunk. But pre that, I was just always dreaming about looking after a bit of land to let nature reassert herself. Yep.
That was Hugh Wilson talking to Cosmo at Hinewai Reserve on Banks Peninsula.
That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We love getting your feedback and ideas for future stories, so do get in touch. Our email address is country@rnz.co.nz.
You can follow and listen to Country Life wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love you to give us a plug on social media or tell a friend about this show. Just click the share button in this app to send this episode to a friend.
And the stories in this episode were produced and presented by Cosmo Kentish Barnes, me, Sally Round, and Janina Schwanecker. And in the studio production team today, David Knowles and Phil Benge.
Catch you next time.
Ka kite.